Good evening, everyone. This is Anita Medina. Tonight I'm going to talk to you about 7 tips on asking for donations. I understand that asking for any kind of donation is intimidating, and with the tips and methods I'm going to give you, this will assist in the process of asking for and obtaining donations, and not only for one-time donors, but for repeat customers. If the methods and tips are utilized properly, you will have return donors, and that's what you want to maintain your method of profit. Tip number 1, research your donor. Read their minds. The words you want to hear them say is, "Wow, it's like you read my mind." How do you get to this point? You research your donor as an individual, but you also have a broad depth of general research on the kinds of people who donate to your nonprofit as a whole group. You need to be able to answer these questions if you want to get into your donor's heart. What kind of words do they use? What do they talk about when they are feeling passionate? What do they care about? What other causes are they part of? Do they have a general history of donating? And if so, is it a donation to types of your nonprofit? What other objectives, fears, and concerns may they have about giving? Thanks to the web, we have more access to information about our donors than ever, as well as the ability to survey our donors and examine how they talk about our cause. Note, however, that if you survey your donors and ask questions of a particular donor, you have to learn to read behind the answer of the answer. You have to address the fears and risks every donor feels, even if the donor herself cannot identify them out loud. We get to connect their existing passions and desires and learn to use their same language. In other words, understand your donor base so well it's like you're reading their minds. Don't worry, this is easier than it sounds if you follow the next 6 steps. Tip number 2, practice, 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 and then practice some more. The best way to dominate your donor visits, get more funds, and create real lasting connections with your nonprofit is to practice every aspect of your ask. In other words, by the time you are actually sitting in front of your prospect, you should have researched the many paths the conversation could take many times over. Understand your talking points, how you'll graciously address common objectives, and the exact way you'll frame your ask allows you to stop thinking about these things and just focus on talking to your donor. Practice your ask. Can't emphasize this enough. Run through how you'll call them on the phone. Plan how to structure your meetings. Decide how long your small time will take at the beginning and how to smoothly transition into your ask itself. Leave no stone unturned. The key to this is practice out loud, then practice in front of a mirror, then record yourself on video practicing. It's painful, but you'll learn things about your delivery and be far more confident and free when it comes to actually meeting the ask. Don't skip these steps. They are vital. Tip 3. Your potential donor should never be surprised that you're asking for a donation. If your potential donor is ever surprised you're asking for money, something is deeply amiss. Make it clear in your first call or contact that you're interested in talking to them about your cause and how they might be able to get involved. Make it clear that, while you're interested in them as a person, there's a deeper purpose for your visit. That way, they'll be able to prepare their response, objectives, and questions. Ensure that they are never surprised and they know what you are going for. Your small talk should include some of this. Tip number 4, stop being boring. Boring feels safe to the presenter. No presenter who just reads bullet points off a PowerPoint does it because they want their audience to eagerly contemplate running from the room. No, they do it because it feels safe. Reading a PowerPoint feels like an easy way to tell your audience all the information they want and be sure not to forget anything important, but instead you fail to keep your audience engaged. The actual way to be safe is to do what we discussed above. Practice and practice again. Then you won't need slides and you can focus instead on not being boring. Don't be afraid to sound too forward when asking very crucial questions, such as why is our nonprofit important to the community and to you? Of course, your real goal is to make your donor both catch your enthusiasm and feel understood. But to get there, you need to let yourself be not boring enough that they want to never talk to you again. Ask your donors for their advice. The old fundraising maxim applies here. Ask for money, you will get advice. Ask for advice, and you will get money. What most people truly want is to be heard. Asking for advice means that they will freely tell you the secret things that are most passionate to them, as well as their biggest fears about giving. And most importantly, the donor will feel valuable and important, which they are. They're the ones whose enthusiasm makes change happen in the world. So ask them for their input and impressions. Tip number 6, your secret weapon is pointed silence. Our culture hates silence. We want to fill it immediately. This is one of the reasons why extroverts do so much worse in sales and fundraising than introverts. But oftentimes, the most important, meaningful thing, the thing your prospect really wants to tell you, won't be said if you quickly fill in that silence. So I'm going to give you 2 examples, one of good fundraising and one of bad fundraising. The first one is the bad fundraiser. What went wrong? Fundraiser asks the question, what's the most important thing about the environment to you? The donor's response is, well, I think environmental damage is a pretty big deal. We're hurting the environment forever, and we don't even realize it. Fundraiser's response is immediate. Yeah, you're right. That's why our program X is so important. Let me tell you. What the donor hears is filled in silence. No, don't do this. Your funding for next year will die 1,000 painful deaths. Here's how that conversation should have worked out. Fundraiser, what's the most important thing about the environment to you? Well, I think environmental damage is a pretty big problem. We're hurting the environment forever and we don't even realize it. How interesting. The fundraiser does not fill in the silence and looks genuinely interested in what the donor has to say. At this point, the donor fills in the silence. Yeah, it's really crazy. In fact, the other day I was thinking about when I was a kid and would go out and look at the stars in the country and see meteors and all kinds of awesome stuff. But now that the city is so big and there's so much light pollution and smog, When I go out there with my kids to our cabin, we're lucky to see anything. It's so sad. Wow. And you were about to start making a generic appeal about one of your programs, totally at random. Now you have much more material to work with and know exactly the right program to talk about. Your donor has practically sold themselves based on your silence. The final tip. When speaking with your donor, be specific. Ask for a specific amount. Don't make your donor do any work. Always ask for a specific amount to contribute to the cause. Why is this important? Because it takes the burden off the donor to figure out what size of a donation is necessary. They don't know anything about your campaign goals. You do. So you ask. So help them out. Don't make your donor do the work. This final slide is my reference. I only have one, and there are so many online tips on how to organize and go forth with donations, which I will be exploring further in other papers. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have any questions, please contact me, make comments on the chat, and so forth.